Good afternoon, and welcome to the Center for American Progress. My name is Catherine Brown, and I'm the Vice President for Education Policy here at CAP. We are very pleased to host this discussion on K-12 computer science education as a vital component of maintaining U.S. competitiveness, preparing students for growing job markets, and increasing opportunities for unrepresented communities. Our discussion on this pressing issue will focus on the opportunity for computer science education to grow the U.S. economy in a rapidly globalizing era. In February, we held an event on the current environment for women and girls in STEM and computer science. The event highlighted new initiatives aimed at increasing the number of girls in computer science and focused on how investing in these programs will help inspire and prepare a new generation of girls to become innovators, scientists, and researchers. Computer science education is an area of great need and great opportunity. The use of computers and software has become ubiquitous in our economy and our lives. I know from the day my 7-year-old signed up for an Instagram account without my knowledge or permission that children are learning at a remarkably rapid clip how to navigate technology. And largely that is a positive development. Studies have predicted that there will be 1.4 million new computer science jobs by 2020 and only 400,000 computer scientists to fill them, leaving a gap of 1 million opportunities. Computer science skills are in high demand in incredibly diverse industries, from retail to medicine, law enforcement, cybersecurity, energy, and beyond. Given this demand, it should come as no surprise that computer science careers provide a secure income. In fact, of all college majors, students who have studied computer science have the highest starting salary. But unfortunately, these skills and opportunities are not being made available to all young people. Only 9% of high schools offer AP Computer Science, and of the students who take that exam, only 22% are female, 10% are Hispanic, and less than 4% are African American. What's more, while women held 57% of all bachelor's degrees awarded in 2012, they only received 18% of computer science degrees, the lowest percentage of any STEM field. But there is hope. A number of initiatives led by states, schools, and businesses have recognized the opportunity that K-12 computer science education offers and are working to expand and diversify the pipeline of students entering the field. And we are thrilled to discuss some of those promising practices today. For those interested in joining the conversation on social media, we will be using the hashtag CSEDin16 for today's conversation. I did want to mention that unfortunately, Congresswoman Delbaney is not able to join us today after all. She is participating in the sit-in on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. So we are going to proceed with our fantastic panel, and I'd now like to introduce the panelists. They represent a range of perspectives on how we can expand and improve computer science education. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jamika Burge, the founder and principal of Design and Technology Concepts. Dr. Burge serves as the co-director of the Collaborative Research Experiences for Undergraduates programs, chairs the Women of Color in Computing Initiative, and facilitates the CDC's Diversity Data Science Initiative, which aims to use data analytics to support diversity in computing. Ruth Farmer, who is Senior Policy Advisor for Tech Inclusion in the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the Executive Office of the President. As the Chief Strategy Officer for the National Center for Women in IT, she was the driving force behind their Aspirations in Computing Talent Development Pipeline. She has also spearheaded multiple national initiatives for Girl Scouts in America, focused on girls' participation in technology. Fred Humphreys, who is the Corporate Vice President for U.S. Government Affairs for Microsoft. Fred is a longtime champion for expanding STEM education in our nation's schools and has been especially passionate about the need for all students to have access to computer science education. And finally, Haiti Partova, the founder of Codeorg. Haiti is a tech entrepreneur and investor and the founder of the International Hour of Code campaign, and he has served as a strategic advisor to numerous startups, including Facebook and Dropouts. So I'd like to invite them to join me on stage right now. Thank you.
Hey.
All right, well, let's start with the why. Why is this important? Why should every student need to learn computer science? I'd love to hear from all of you on this point. Adi?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. You know, it's funny because when I run an organization called Code.org, people regularly assume that our message is that every student must learn to code. And really our message is that every school must teach computer science. And when you think about K through 12 schools, at the K through 12 level, you don't teach kids just to get into a career. You teach kids a little bit of everything. Even if you want to become, let's say, a lawyer, you don't do law school through K through 12. You learn chemistry and biology. And literally the goal of K through 12 schools is to teach you a little bit about everything. And if you graduate, you come well-rounded and know about all that stuff. And the idea that right now the majority of our schools teach you nothing about computer science really doesn't make any sense. And even if you wanted to, you don't have the choice to study it. That just seems wrong. And it's wrong on multiple levels. It's partly wrong because these are the best paying jobs in the country. It's sort of a missed opportunity because not only is this the largest sector of all new wages, it's also the fastest sector of new wages. So whether you care about the opportunity for the kids or just the country's competitiveness, the single largest slice of the pie of new wages is computing occupations. It just passed healthcare, it just passed management. So you'd think we'd at least offer it as an option in the schools. And then lastly, I regularly get asked, shouldn't students get to choose what they want to study? And first of all, the answer should be yes. This should be offered as an option if they want to study it. And in fact, in schools that offer the choice, if you ask students what their favorite course is, and you ask them to rank their courses in order of preference, if you take out the core courses, like you have to take courses, and basically the elective courses and the advanced placement courses, computer science comes at the top right behind the arts. So people put the arts first and then computer science, and then the other courses. So it's actually students' favorite course and leads to the best paying jobs, and then most of our schools don't teach it as an option. To me, that seems really broken.
That's fascinating. Would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. When I think about computer science, I happen to have to think about growing up, my family. And so just really quickly, my father is retired now, but he was a university president for 30 years, 2 different historically black colleges. One Tennessee State University, Florida A&M University. In 1964, he was the first African-American to get a PhD in physical chemistry from the University of Pittsburgh. So growing up, for me, I got a chemistry set every Christmas. And I would almost blow up the house every Christmas. And then I went to law school. Now, when he would talk to me about back then, right, chemistry was like science, 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 the innovators. That's what's cool. That's where if you want to make a contribution to society, make a difference and be able to apply your skills, that's what you needed. Now fast forward, he's 80. I talk to him at least once a week every Sunday. And what does he talk to me about? He still talks to me about STEM, but he talks to me a little less about the chemistry. He talks to me about what are you doing, what is Microsoft doing lately for people when it comes to computer science? Because that is the future of what you need on the skills. Now let's fast forward. If you're looking to the future, what we talk about, there's a book on it called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's machine-to-machine learning, it's bots, it's artificial intelligence, it's everything that you do. Every job from aerospace to, hey, got a new car recently. I looked under the hood. I'm like, what is this? Oh, this is technology. It's not an automobile. It's technology. Every aspect of what you're doing, there is that aspect of CS or the technology side. Now, we talk about STEM. I really think it's about CS, and I really think to what Hadi was saying that's just really, really important. If we're going to continue to have the leading technology companies and leading companies of the world and be difference makers of continuing with innovation, it's one thing you got to do. It's CS. And not to have that option in education, and because of the numbers that you gave, Catherine, of not having it in the schools, right? How do you think you just show up in college, oh yeah, I want to go major in CS. No, that's not how it happens. You got to be exposed to it. And then you go chase what your passion is. But we need to have more options to be able to grow. So with that.
So building a little bit on what Fred is saying, we as a country, we are already an information and innovation economy. That's where our economic growth lies. And while other countries can say, oh, we want to grow, we're going to build an aerospace industry, or we're going to build a technology industry, and that's how they can grow their economy, we're already there. And if we want to grow our economy, we need workers that can move innovation forward. We are not going to revert to a farming economy. We're not going to revert in the traditional sense to manufacturing. So there were some very exciting things in the Week of Making last week regarding manufacturing and growth in that space. But if we want to grow economically, we need an educated workforce that can do these jobs. And companies like Microsoft are global. And if we want those jobs being filled in the United States, our kids need to learn these skills and at least have the option to consider studying computer science in college.
I agree. And to build again on what Ruth and Fred and Hadi said, you know, I see computer science as the fourth R. We were talking about this earlier today. There's reading, writing, arithmetic. I think computer science, or at least understanding computer science principles, helps to understand the larger context of problem solving and critical thinking and how to apply.
It has an R at the end of it.
Computer science. What did I say?
That's your fourth R, the R at the end of
the
computer.
science. I love it. I love it. Working it out already. And so I'm going to push it a bit further. I think to really be inclusive of that fourth R, if you will, it also takes a diversity of thinking, a diversity of ideas. If we really want to be innovative, whatever that means, it really requires us to think more broadly about who's bringing their ideas to the table, what experiences are coming to the table, which means we have to really be broadly thinking, be inclusive in the way we teach computer science and how we apply problem solving to different kinds of solutions. And I think given the birth and the breadth and the opportunity and the reach of computer science, we have a really amazing opportunity to bring a multitude of ideas and ideologies to the table.
So I'd love to talk a little bit now about what's going on right now. So for example, the private sector talks a lot about the need for computer scientists. Can you tell us about the work that Microsoft is doing and any other private companies you may be aware of?
Oh, absolutely. First, I would just start off with that this is something that I'll talk about from the Microsoft perspective, but you know what I feel good about? This is one of the areas, because we fiercely compete with a lot of tech companies from a business side, we all uniformly agree. We all have different programs. And we started a program called TEALS, 4 or 5 years ago, where we go into the schools and we work with teaching the teacher on how to teach and train on computer science. And we're in many states, over I want to say 20 states. And we just actually entered into a partnership with in the state of Rhode Island, where we'll do all the schools there. Now, Rhode Island's a little small state, but it's a great pilot for us to see if we can do a state, and we do it with other companies to come in and have CS, and it's just taken off because there's also a training component that you're lacking, unfortunately, sometimes in the schools, and so that's a really exciting program that we're doing on the TEALS front. That where we're trying to make a difference. And then another thing that we're doing in Codeorg is very engaged and been a partner on is make computer science count. And that's from a public policy perspective. Because there are not many schools that allow computer science to count towards its core requirement, we've gone in with other partners and companies and organizations to say, hey, CES should count towards a core requirement. And when we first embarked upon this journey, there was only 9 states, and now we're at 30, plus the District of Columbia. That's a way of, baby steps make a difference. It's a baby step in the right direction, because if it becomes a part of a core, you might get an interest, and you got to check that off and say, hey, you know what? I kind of like that.
I'd love to hear about some nonprofit initiatives that are underway.
Sure. We're pretty heavily engaged in this. Obviously, it's my life mission to help solve this problem. But what Code.org has done has been more than anything else implementing computer science programs in schools, giving the classroom teachers curriculum, and then more importantly, giving them the training, because it's by far the biggest shortage here is basically teachers who can teach this field. The problem is that our schools aren't teaching it. And for our schools to teach it, somebody needs to be doing the teaching. It's impossible to hire a software engineer to become a computer science teacher. But we don't hire surgeons to become biology teachers. We hire teachers. Your average biology teacher or math teacher or tech teacher or even English teacher can learn to teach 9th grade computer science or 3rd grade computer science after a relatively short amount of training. So the bulk of the work that Code.org does is training literally thousands of teachers a month to basically enable them to offer at least one class in the school that offers this as an option. And then what we find is as soon as they offer that class, it gets way higher enrollment than anybody expected, which then leads to at least the kids having a chance to pursue their dreams and to pursue opportunity. But I also want to build on what Fred said, which is that this is a thing that is, this issue has been an issue of growing based on baby steps, as Fred said, and we are at the point where we need to take much, much more than baby steps as a country. This is, I'm not saying this is any form of disagreement. This is, we're in a divided time in our country. There is nothing more unifying than this idea. There's nothing that I don't know of any other idea in America that nobody disagrees with. Nobody disagrees with letting kids have a chance to study their favorite course, and especially nobody disagrees with it if it's also the course that leads to the most economic growth and fills the most jobs. Microsoft basically helped lead an effort to get CEOs, governors, educators all signing a letter about this, and it wasn't just signed by all of these competing tech companies, not just Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt and Larry Ellison, but also the CEOs of Walmart, Target, Delta Airlines, DuPont, John Deere, Disney, these companies, banks, et cetera, and 29 governors all agreeing on this. So we have a huge amount of national agreement on this, and we need to move beyond the baby steps.
And it was Democrat and Republicans.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that of those governors that Hadi's referring to.
Well, it definitely taps into.
That's unusual these days.
Indeed.
Well, and I would say from the White House perspective, this is very much an all-hands-on-deck call. When the president announced Computer Science for All on January 30th, there were $250 million in commitments from the private sector and the public sector to move this forward, and many more things have come online since. And this is a bipartisan issue. We've been very happy with the support from both sides, that this is an economic issue and that this is something that we need to do. The fact that the country of Estonia is beating us at this is not okay. And they've got computer science for all their kids. Now they have far less kids than we do, but I think we can step up to the plate on this. And the community has really rallied around this nationally.
Fascinating.
And I want to say a couple of things really quickly. A big part of this is the in-school piece, right? How do we provide in-school training our teachers? But I think another part of this exposure piece that really gets students engaged in computing and computer science is the out-of-school, the informal education. So you see a lot of summer camps, you'll see a lot of program opportunities for students that take place out of school, which really get a lot of good traction for underrepresented minorities and women, particularly in exposing them, especially if computer science isn't offered in the schools. And so there is sort of this two-pronged approach in really getting access and getting exposure. The other thing I want to address is the fact that there's still more to do, right? There's been a lot of commitment, there's been a lot of interest in ensuring that computer science is that fourth R, if you will, if you allow me that privilege. But I think we all recognize too that there's more that we can do to really make computing for all. Right, and I think part of what we're trying to do, especially in working with NCWIT, I'm actually working with NCWIT to create this paradigm shift for how do we change messaging around women and girls, Black women and girls particularly, in computing. What does that mean? What are their influencers? What do they reach out to? What do these groups, which are really no different from any other group, right? They just happen to not have the numbers of representation in computer science. So I think the opportunity is ripe to continue a lot of these informal education opportunities, as well as grow our understanding of the issues of intersectionality that might keep minority students and underrepresented groups from participating.
Can I pick up on something on it? I want to pick up on a lot of the different points. And first one is to start with Hadi, the point that he made. He is absolutely correct. We have to move faster, and we need to take large steps. Just bear with me just real quickly. I was in New York the last couple of days, and I met at a event here in D.C. This African-American woman who has started a company, it's only 3 years old, it's in its startup phase, called the Crated. It's a fashion and technology company, and she provides like a system integrator technologies for clothes. And has been part of and doing a project with Google where she made a dress, and her technology was a part of it, and you could actually type on the dress and words come out. It was the coolest different thing. She's like 27, like today's innovators. And we had dinner on Monday night. And she asked me a question. Says, right at the end of the dinner, like, what is, based upon what you've seen, what do you have a concern about? And my biggest concern is, right, that this country is not doing what we need to be doing to continue the competitive edge for jobs of the future, right, and innovation of the future. You think about who are the innovators in the world, it's all the members of Codeorg, and then some of the names he mentioned, Zuckerberg, and from Apple, Google, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever, Tesla for that matter, are here in the U.S., but it's requiring the CS. And I said to him, I'm just really concerned that we're not doing it. President Obama's, CS for all is really, really good, but we got to move faster, and that means shaking up the education system, and it means doing what we need to do to get the exposure, which one of the things that made me feel good about is that she brought some of the people from her team. It was 3 African Americans and 1 Latino. And I'm just like, wow. And Peter Thiel actually helped to fund them. And it you feel good. But we got to move faster. We got to do more. And we got to, in that process, take on the diversity. So we need the White House to continue to lead and make sure the White House helps us get money, White House, on Capitol Hill.
So we've heard about one barrier, which is teachers, and I think I hear this over and over again. How do we find the teaching force that's actually going to understand how to teach computer science? Are there any other solutions other than training the current workforce that you all are working on?
Well, for the OSTP, training teachers is our top priority because a teacher can have a lifetime impact on a huge volume of students. And I kind of envision a future where we have this fantastic public school pipeline supported by wonderful out-of-school, after-school parallel tracks that are enabling kids to get that wraparound support that takes them forward throughout their lives. Because it, just like in advertising, it takes 7 touches to get you to stick something, right? So you're going to have it in school, in elementary school, and then in your Girl Scout troop, and then back in your high school, and then in your capstone project that you do as a service project. There's lots of places where this can tie in. So training teachers is critical. The pre-service teacher pipeline is weak. It's very weak. And in fact, the data point that I've heard is there are a sum total of 4 PhD faculty in the United States that have a PhD in computer science education research that are attached to a school of education. 4 people. So we don't have, you cannot go to college right now in very much volume. I think there's 1 or 2 places, but you really can't go to college to become a computer science teacher. That's not a thing. And as you all know, computer science education in the United States is localized. It's local to the states. In some states, it's local to the school district and the individual principal. So whatever community members can do, and we need all hands on deck for this, to talk to their local leaders about having computer science take precedence, whether it's in your high school or your elementary school, your PTA group, or your state level, because Secretary King cannot say every school must teach computer science. That's not the way the U.S. education system works. So
King.
I know his name is King, but there are things that the Department of Education can do, and the Department of Education recently did 2 things. One, the I3 grants are out, so there is funding available in the I3 call, and they specifically call out the computer science as an opportunity there. They also issued some guidance around the CTE funding and clarifying that some of the existing STEM funding can actually be used for computer science, and calling that out specifically. And just, say to the world, computer science is part of STEM. If there's funding for STEM, it's computer science, and stand firm on that one. So definitely need communities, states, and it's been fantastic that we have now 30 states that have come online to count computer science, but we need more aggressive approaches like Rhode Island, and Arkansas is doing great things to get that moving faster.
What about time? It seems like we've heard about teachers, we've heard about money. What about time in the school day, given all the demands on our schools today to teach reading, to teach math? There are so many things that are to teach social and emotional skills, to teach English language acquisition. Is this a barrier that you hear a lot, and are there any innovative solutions that you can identify?
We hear about this all the time in the schools we work with. but it's actually much easier to overcome than you would think. Certainly, if you think at the high school level, most schools aren't trying to make computer science a requirement. You were earlier mentioning chemistry. If computer science was simply available like chemistry, students could then choose, do I want to take chemistry or do I want to take computer science? And if they choose computer science over chemistry, you're not taking time away from them. They're just making a different optional choice. At the elementary school level, I actually believe that every student should have some basic level of exposure at the sort of ABCs level. But that's something, there's a number of things that are both in elementary school and in middle school that are effectively what schools themselves recognize as outdated tech ed. Most schools have a course that teaches you how to search the web and how to browse the web. And people know that like kids don't need to be taught how to, like if you just give them any kind of device, they figure that out quickly. Instagram.
My niece tries to swipe the bus stop sign in New York. She walks up and she's like, why is this not swiping?
Right, especially when you consider that
Not
those tech
innovative
ed
enough for her.
courses are mostly being taught on outdated machines even,
Right.
that may or may not support the swiping. So the schools for sure recognize that. As soon as you tell them, why are you teaching this type of tech ed? Why don't you teach kids how to create technology rather than how to use last decade's technology? That actually there's plenty of time that you can save out of the school day there.
See, I mean, I think what Hadi's getting to, it's foundational. It needs, I mean, we really have to just look at which is, talk about complicated, which Ruth has kind of touched on, is the education system. So, CS is making it count as a core requirement. It needs to be foundational in how we integrate it and look at, what are we teaching today? Because the needs of the future, if you look throughout our history, when land-grant universities were formed, and there are different type of schools that evolved. Now we're at a place, right, that, well, we may want to wake up and say, okay, we may need to just look at jobs of the future, things of the future, what are the skills that you need? And CS is a part of it, so it's foundational where it's a core requirement. It's not an either or chemistry, it's CS, it's part of it. And where do you start it? From the K through 12, where does it fit in for exposed? And then, they at least have that option. So I think the timing piece is, quite frankly, not a barrier. I think it's the curriculum and re-looking at the curriculum.
But it's also considering, if I can real quickly, it's considering not just that there is the availability of computer science, but how do we keep the students engaged, right? We know that girls, for example, are underrepresented in the space, right? We know that minorities are. And it isn't because there's no interest. There is a massive interest for these students in computer science, but we find that when they get into this area, they leave, often running, right? Because folks don't look like them in the space. And so part of what we should include in our education is cultural sensitivity, cultural responsiveness, right? Understanding that it takes boys and girls to make the world go round, and understanding how to solve these problems. And I think having that understanding in teaching computer science really can go a long way to keeping the talent when they come in the door.
And let's pick up on that. 43,000 students typically graduate out of college with CS. Out of that is like 22% are women, 9%.
18.
There you go.
Less than 10,000.
Yeah, and then like 9, I understand, on the Hispanic side, and 4 African American, and that just there. And then the majority of schools today, correct me, I got OSTP Wikipedia here, that you have as far as the majority of public schools today, public schools in the U.S. now are majority minority.
Yes.
More and more.
So whoa.
Well, like if you look at the fact that
there's some issues. How do you deal with how do you deal with that?
So one of the things that I think was a really jarring statistic for me was I was working with the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for Hispanics, and right now today, Latinas are 16% of women, but they are 7.9% of women going to college, right? So they're going to college at almost half their representative rate. That's a problem. And as the population grows, and we have a growing population of Hispanic students in K-12, and when those students, we need those students to go to college. We need them to work in all kinds of professional fields. And so this is a critical thing. And when you talk about the fact that almost 60% of college degrees are going to women, and 18% of computing degrees, that's just from a numbers game, we've got a real problem. And you break that down by the racial and ethnic minorities, we're missing a vast, like almost 70% of the population is not participating in this field.
Have you learned about how to better attract minorities and
Yeah,
women?
one thing I wanted to talk about this is that if you think about how the school system works, there's a lot of courses that you may think stereotypically are things that boys prefer. But if you take a course like calculus, for example, stereotypes might tell you that girls don't like math. But if you look at calculus, there's roughly an equal representation of girls and boys in AP calculus. And it's one of the most popular AP exams there is. 1 million students a year take that exam. Sadly, the majority of them fail, which raises the question of why are we telling all these kids to take calculus? But at least because it's baked into the school system, it gets a lot of representation, diverse representation from both sides, both genders. And in Codeorg's courses, similarly, because we integrate them into the school system, we have amazing diversity numbers. So our students in classrooms are about 47% female, they're 48% Black or Hispanic. And what the other thing that people don't talk about is is basically the socioeconomic gap. In our classrooms, the students are 47% on free and reduced meal plans. And you know, the students on the free and reduced meal plans are the biggest deal because these are the kids who basically can't afford lunch. But they're now taking a course that may lead to one of the best paying jobs in the country. And if you look at, you know, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, almost all of them came from an upper middle class background because those are the only schools and environments where you even get exposed to this field. But I believe the most important key to getting diversity is to, with an eye towards this diversity, integrating this into the school system because so many of the other courses that are in the school system do result in diverse representation.
I think there's also, I think he's spot on, but I think that, you know, first you also have to have just the exposure. One of the things that I really like that Hadi's done, because this is, you know, for him a big passion. I mean, it's what he does full time.
Doesn't come through.
Absolutely. Is I have one of his Hour of Code certificates. I mean, it's code.org, and I did some coding with some students from schools here in DC. So, and actually with the chancellor, Kai Henderson. And we had these, you know, all young African-American kids. And it's like one of the most rewarding days for me because here they are doing this hour of code and they're learning in a fun way. And it opens up their eyes like, wow, I might be able to do this. So that just sparked that interest, right? Just from an hour of code could just what it can do. And otherwise they would have no other exposure possibly.
And then we've got to put them into a school with a rigorous progression of computer science education.
But you
I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, but you got to start somewhere, and then you have to have, right, which many didn't see is like, wow, there's an African American, you know, working at Microsoft. And I'm like, yeah, you can go do this, and I wish I did the hour of code and did the computer science a long time ago, and I'd be on the core side as opposed to the cost center side aspect.
It's a cost center. Well, I think one critical thing I want to make sure we get into this conversation is a big piece of fixing this problem is overcoming bias. And Jamika can talk more about this, but we can't just do more of the same, which is why we have a new computer science AP course, why we have the new Exploring Computer Science ramp-up course, and there's new courses being developed that specifically focus on presenting a broad array of opportunities, a broad array of things that you do in computer science that appeal to lots of different students, because there is a bias in the mind of people, all people, of what does a technical person look like. So we've got a media issue that's being addressed by lots of different groups are working on that, and including the project Jamika's working on. But this issue of bias exists in all parts of society, and bias among teachers, counselors, parents, superintendents, etc., of whether or not it's important or those kids are going to be interested or those are the kind of kids that succeed in these careers. That we need to be very intentional about that piece.
I know you want to ask another question.
No,
but
actually,
I have to share
I
this.
would love to hear your thoughts
So,
on this
I mean,
question.
it's because we aren't on parity that we're not offering computer science, for example, in schools at the same parity as, say, mathematics or calculus, that we have to talk about integrating opportunities for underrepresented students to participate. right? It's because of, so a lot of times when I'm out and I'm to be someplace, you're not getting it today, but I wear my hair out, I wear my red lipstick, and I wear my real cute clothes, right? Because I don't science. And I think that's part of what we have to shift, right? And not just what does a computer scientist look like, but how do we ensure that everybody gets the same. And because computer science isn't in all the schools, or because our underrepresented students who are not of color but maybe don't have the green, right, don't have access, then we have to see this from what are the multidimensionalities of how people are actually living and existing. And I mentioned this before, what are those intersectionality questions? Where do you come from, backgrounds? What's keeping us from being able to? Could you hear me?
Do you have a broadband connection at home? Do you have a device? So this divide of income is really critical too.
It's huge.
That if you can do all the online courses in the world, but if you're going home and sharing a device with your whole family, or you're only accessing the internet mostly on a phone that's pay as you go, we cannot expect that to be a level opportunity. So that's why it's so important that it's offered at school, and then there's other initiatives underway to get broadband to every American as well.
So I did want to pick up on something you said, Ruth, which is we want all students to go to college, which obviously we do, but I do wonder if there are opportunities for students who don't aspire to go to college or choose not to.
I
if
didn't
they get,
say we want all students to go to college.
or we want to prepare all students for college, and I certainly agree
Want them
with
to have
that.
the option if they would like.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, but I wonder if you're seeing examples of programs or initiatives that prepare students for very well-paying jobs if they stop at a high school diploma.
This is the one field where the wealthiest people in the world literally are the ones who dropped out of college. It's kind of an unusual thing. And I'm not suggesting that other people should pursue that, but it's literally the best examples of the greatest wealth ever amassed on earth are people who dropped out of college because they were good at this field. And there's plenty others who dropped out of college or couldn't afford to go to college. College dropouts are the ones who were lucky enough to be able to pay for college and drop out. There's a nonprofit in New York City that took high school graduates who couldn't afford college, that were earning roughly $20,000 salaries, and they're 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, put them through an 8-week program to teach them coding and computer science, and they exited that program with $70,000 salaries on average.
Incredible.
Yeah, and then you think, okay, if that took 8 weeks, why isn't this in the school system? Why does that need to be this sort of like small nonprofit that like 30 kids got a chance to get it to do? And we have, 16 million kids in high school that most of them don't even have the choice if they wanted to. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to college, but that there's clearly such a great demand for this field. And the majority of Americans don't necessarily go into jobs that require a college education. And there's plenty of computing jobs that aren't necessarily inventing the next Snapchat, but that do involve familiarity with this technology.
And I would argue that there's a lot of really meaningful things that need to be done in the world beyond inventing a Snapchat and making a lot of money. We have a tremendous need in the federal government for innovation and cybersecurity and defense, and there's a whole gamut of tech roles that can be accessed through community colleges, through tech boot camps and coding boot camps. There's positions in networking and infrastructure, and there's a whole lot that goes into this. The other thing I think I'd like to highlight, 60% of tech jobs are not in the tech industry. There are tech jobs in pharma, there are tech jobs in banking, there are tech jobs in government. It is literally everywhere. And last week I met with this woman who was with the American Chemical Society, and she was like, we absolutely know we need people to learn computer science because for the oil industry, for the chemical industry to go forward, we need innovation, which means people need to have this understanding. So there are lots of emerging pathways, lots of work going on in the community college space, lots and lots of online resources as well. The White House Tech Hire Initiative is working with communities to upskill workers from industries that have fallen on hard times, manufacturing cities and so on, to bring people skills to come into the tech industry at multiple levels.
So I if I could just real
Please.
quickly, I totally agree with what Ruth is saying, but there's something, and this is just me personally, so this is not wearing any kind of company hat, but just being raised in a home of an educator. When I hear this and I think of biases, one is we know, or studies have shown, that the more education that you receive, it tends to map and correlate with earning potential aspect. And as the country becomes more, by 2040 or whatever the date is, on majority, minority, always one of the things as a minority I get a little nervous about is like when they talk about like, well, should all people go further in education? And just maybe it's just me of being paranoid aspect is that underrepresented are going to be going one path and white America is going to be going another path. And watching out for biases in systems
Absolutely.
and expectations and things of that nature. So I've always been one as kind of just as a zealous advocate of pushing one to its limit of how far they can go. And everybody will not go this, everybody's not going to be successful, and that's not a race thing, or some will just get further than others, but I just am very cautious of, an agenda on that.
I think it's a very good caution to think about tracking. I wonder if you have thoughts on how we can ensure that every student has an actual meaningful choice between going to college or career so that they're deciding.
Well, I think providing the options, right? Letting them know what's available to them. And as part of this exposure piece, if I know that, in my story, for example, I started college as a business major. I mean, I learned how to type as a senior in high school, right? So, and we had a computer at home, but it was for playing games. I wasn't one of those folks who took them apart. But certainly if I'd known that there was this thing called computer science when I was in middle school or even in high school, then who knows how my trajectory might have veered or got me to now, who knows, right? But I think part of the challenge is that we don't provide that exposure often early enough, and again, on parity with other kinds of offerings that we give to students. And often when students are exposed, it might be because their parents are either educators, or their parents have gone to college, or I taught at a summer camp where all the students were children of faculty members, right? There was no one else in the class whose parent was not associated with the institution. And so I think knowing that there are these options that are available to students and that their parents are aware too, that's a huge part of this, right? It's on par with teaching the kids in school the computer science piece and expecting them to go home and meditate on it when they've got other issues at hand, right? I'm babysitting, or I don't have access to the computer, or my parents don't have time to help me understand what the opportunities are for me. So I think really giving the exposure and providing the opportunities, but also equipping parents and letting them know that they're a big part of this as well.
So one thing that comes to mind is one of the reasons that there are such returns on computer science is because the number of people getting these degrees is so limited. And I don't want to be, pessimistic, but I wonder if you think about this, if we actually were to achieve your vision, would we start to see the returns decline? And the basic laws of economics imply that.
So there's a couple thoughts I have on this. First, currently 11% of all open jobs are in computing, and only about 2% of college graduates. But also that computing part is growing at double the nation's average. So it's growing twice as fast as everything else. So that slice is both the largest slice of the pie, and it's faster growing than the pie itself. So there's a lot of room effectively to get to the point that you worry about. But I personally, we're teaching this at third grade. You don't teach kids stuff in third grade because there's jobs in it. You just teach it because it's foundational. And I think there's aspects of learning how technology works that we should just be teaching regardless of, we're still teaching chemistry, not because there's so many chemistry jobs we can't fill. In fact, we have an oversupply of majors in most sciences. Right. There's too many graduates and not enough jobs. But we're not pulling those sciences out of high school because of the jobs. My favorite example of that is the question of security, where we read daily or at least weekly about these major security hacks where Target lost all of their customer data, and then every other health insurance company has lost all these customer social security numbers or health records. And then what we all, when we went through K-12 schools, learned about what is a regular virus and what's a vaccine and how to protect your body. and most of us don't know how to protect our computers. And the reason these hacks happen, it's not because the security teams at those companies are incompetent. It's usually because one of the employees got an email that said something and they really didn't understand what they were doing, and somebody took advantage of the employees. The only way to secure our country and our companies is having a more educated employee base. And that's something, it doesn't matter how many jobs you fill, we still need kids to understand the basics.
And to pick up on that, I think President Obama has just showed incredible leadership in OSTP because based upon what Hadi was talking about, the numbers and the data speaks for itself. And with the CS for All, when you go out and talk about, I think it was like $7 billion or something of that nature. Four? Okay.
So
4, 7. Yeah, that's a big
Large
uplift.
number.
It's a large number. And for us in the tech space and Microsoft, one of the things that it's like a top priority. And there's this coalition for computer science education coalition, CSEC, that is focused on getting Congress to set aside just $250 million. I mean, that's in street vernacular, that's chump change. But just to be able to have funding, in the classrooms for teachers and for students to be able to be exposed to CS. And we have 108 companies and a part of it in different organizations, and we have 130 members, bipartisan, who've done a Dear Colleague on it. We had in the Senate getting a little bit into the inside baseball, labor, HHS markup last week, 5 senators, Democrats and Republicans. And so we are looking to try to see this happen. We want to see the White House keep on nudging Congress and making sure it's on Mr. Donovan's plate to when they get to that real negotiation, put that $250 million in, just slip that right on in there. And no, I'm serious. There's an aspect to it because this makes a difference on meeting the needs on that data that Hadi outlined, on having what we need, right, to feed the system. It addresses it. I get beat up all the time. I didn't have more diversity on the core tech side. It's like there's pipeline, there's this. So I can go on and on, but that's what I think we need.
Well, my first thought when you asked that question was people thought computers were going to put everyone out of jobs, right? And now we have an entire industry and world that is enabled by technology. So, but the other thing that I think, beyond the jobs conversation, when you say we need more people because there are these jobs, the flip side of that is we wouldn't need them if there wasn't the jobs. But we need them because we need new innovation. And we can't, think about the technology that you're using right now today that you couldn't even envision 4 years ago and how fast that moves. We can't even predict what the technology might look like, especially when we have the full breadth of Americans of all colors and backgrounds contributing to the innovation and solving problems, solving all kinds of different problems we didn't know and we needed solved, identifying places to innovate that haven't been touched yet. So I think the economy is going to grow as we grow the people and the minds that are bringing in their input.
That's right. I'll add, I'm not sure if we're sort of going, if you got other questions, but I'm going to go back to my standby. If we make computer science one of the basic R's, right, then we'll get to see much more clearly what kind of innovation exists for us, right? Who's going to be bringing the next ideas to bear for us? I remember being in grad school and thinking about, we were asked questions about, how do you design a video system that allows you to share videos and to provide content, but also give tags to the video so that you know what you're looking at before you open the package. And then there was YouTube, right? So moving so quickly now is really the norm. But again, how do we give people what they need to be part of that discussion, to be part of the solutions? And I think, again, making it a basic access point can help to shift a lot of our thinking, where return on investment is an important term for business, but that term isn't really relevant without the people capable of making the business happen. And I think if we go back and start at the education space with our students, we can sort of cover a multitude of sins in that space.
That is a great moment. We'd love to take your questions from the
Can I
audience.
mention one thing as a
Yes, of
follow-on
course.
to that? This is an issue which is, I think, beyond the point of people questioning whether it's a good or a bad idea. You know, in terms of your making this the 4 R's, there was a survey done by Horizon Media asking parents, you know, after reading, writing, and math, what should be the next most important course? 50% of Americans said computer science. That means the other 50, all the rest of the courses were divided amongst the other 50% of Americans. And then the president himself has said that this is no longer an optional skill. It's a basic skill next to reading, writing, and math. The issue we have is probably the people in between, the regular parents and the president, which is basically Congress or school district administrators or state officials. Not that they're against this, but I think they aren't themselves fully aware of the desire and the interest. And something everybody here can do, if you're a parent, ask your school, do you teach computer science? Or if you're a voter, asking your senator or congressman, because the desire for this among the American public is actually extremely high, and there's literally no counter argument. We're all in agreement, but it's not because we handpicked people who agree on this. Literally everybody agrees on this, and it's really about moving towards action. That's what's most important for our country.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience? We have one in the back.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for holding this panel. My name is Victoria Shao, and I work at PFLAG, but I'm actually a student at MIT, so this subject is very near and dear to my heart. But I wanted to ask, you have all clearly very carefully considered factors that affect access to computer science classes, but could you talk a little bit about how you think math literacy is affecting people's access and sort of comfortableness with computer science? Thank you.
Sure. Math is an absolutely critical skill, and getting an equitable level of math preparation for all students is critical. One thing that I've been looking at for a number of years is the fact that if you are a low-income student, you are disproportionately less prepared and coming into college needing to take remedial math your freshman year, which essentially exits you from getting any kind of STEM degree because they are foundational and they build on each other. So if you have to spend your first fall term in remedial math, you're out of cycle, financial aid is only 4 years, etc. So we have this pretty critical gatekeeper that is rigorous math preparation. And as Hadi said, vast numbers of students don't pass that calculus test. And so I do think foundational math is critical, and they two go very much hand in hand.
I think that the way you formed the question is the way a lot of people think, which is teaching this instead of that. And you know, if you aren't good enough at math, you can't do computer science. I think the right way to think of this is to say, can't we use computer science to make math more fun and engaging for kids, and then have them learn to do math better? As an example, which do you think is easier to get a student excited by? Teaching them a math function so that they can answer a multiple choice question, or teaching them a math function so they can code an Instagram filter? Both involve math. But if you think about the kids' motivation level, the first one is just this boring, I'm going to get tested and I'll get it wrong, and you know, I'll be disappointed and my grades will be bad. It's just like it's all negativity. And the second is like fun and creative. You don't even need to try to motivate them. It's the reason kids label this as their favorite course, because it channels their inner motivation. And I think the beauty of computer science is that you can actually make kids want to learn these other fields, because if you can't actually make something exciting with computers unless you learn the fields that go around it as well.
Exactly right. You know, computer science is completely connected with these other areas. Like, you're learning, there's a Foundations of Computer Science class which often teaches you binary numbers, right? Or basic structures of an algorithm, or problem solving, right? All of that has mathematical basis.
Even reading
understanding.
and writing.
All of it, right? It's all connected. And so I completely agree, not dissecting computing or even math, but computer science, I think, represents a great way to combine knowledge of these other areas as well.
Other questions? Right in the front row.
Hi, yeah, Christina Colfer with EdNexus Advisors. Question about the barriers to scaling this. So you are up to 29 states and the District of Columbia, but what is really preventing you from getting this to go further, and why? And what are their biggest hurdles ahead? I mean, this sounds sort of like just a no-brainer, but on the other hand, I know you have a lot of hurdles. And then my counter question is, why doesn't this just happen organically with kids, just logging on and learning themselves?
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, on the organically happening question, most kids, if you imagine an 11-year-old, don't like to come home from school and then learn more stuff on their own. Some do, and those are usually the wealthiest kids with parents that basically encourage them to. And so I think we shouldn't, the learning online on your own is sort of a Band-Aid or a backstop or sort of something we could do to supplement what our K-12 public school education does. But it's not, we spend $1 trillion a year on K-12 public education. Surely some of that, at least $200 million, can be spent on this field for all the reasons we mentioned. And then in terms of the barriers to scaling, we should recognize as Americans that this is actually happening already in our country at a pace that is unprecedented. So it's not like, oh, there's all these problems, but nobody knows how to fix them and we can't do it. It's actually, there's all these problems and opportunity, and our country is acting faster than it ever has done to add something to the curriculum. So there's already 120 cities who have said this has got to be part of our curriculum. There's many more cities left. But at the city level, at the state level, at the student level, at the teacher level, roughly 15% of the entire country has chosen to add this to their curriculum in the last 3 years. So it's really more about basically stepping on the gas pedal, and what that needs more than anything else, frankly, is funding. And funding meaning government funding, not just, private company funding is fantastic and is basically what's fueled that so far. And there's 6 or 7 states that have also decided at the state level to fund this, but this is something I believe the federal government should be basically fueling as much as it can.
Other questions? In the fourth row?
I have 3 quick questions. I'm a retired teacher, and when I retired, the nearest thing to a computer was a Wang. So, that's been a long time ago. But the first question is, do you have a statistic on those who leave the computer science work? Because I was at a hearing several years ago when they were inquiring, I believe it was Microsoft, why are you bringing in foreigners on this special visa to do these jobs? And the answer was that Americans don't like to work alone, and they were hard pressed to get applicants. That's one. It doesn't sound true, but it might be. And the other is on the College Board exams or the SATs, ACT test, do you have a section on computer science so that the students study like crazy and cram for these SAT tests? Why isn't computer on there? Then they would be more interested in studying it in high school, I think.
Well, I'll be glad to, go ahead.
I was just going to say there is no computer science college board, although there is the GRE for computer science for graduate school, but that's for you to get a master's or PhD.
It's not required in testing because our schools don't teach it.
That's right.
And it would be unfair to test students for something that the schools aren't teaching.
I can't speak to that hearing on, doesn't ring a bell with me, frankly, on the that you're raising the Microsoft. But I will say something, though, and try to address what you're raising on the H-1B, on the high-skilled visas. And then, one of the things that I think that you've kind of, hopefully we've tried to convey and educate on is that when you have in this U.S., I think it's 500,000 jobs, but what do they require open? It requires computer science. We're only doing around 40,000 because I've been off lately on my data on this panel. I'll talk to my team about that.
Great.
Yeah, they're doing great. Aspects. So you're having a shortfall when it comes to filling the needs. And so what does a company do that's a multinational company? 4.5% of when you think about the business is the population is the U.S. Is the other remaining is the rest of the world. And so you're going to look for talent all throughout. And if you need that talent to continue to be competitive and innovative, then you're going to go look for those high-skilled workers. And I think it's important. This is a country that I'm not for throwing up all these walls. I'm for tearing walls down and bringing people in, because this is a country, I think, that's made up of immigrants, and it's made it, which is why we Microsoft support comprehensive immigration reform as well as high-skilled immigration. So wherever that talent is, that we can have it here in the U.S. and build upon it. And then at the same time, which is very important, to be a part of an effort, CSEC and many others, to get more computer science in the classroom and get it taught and get it exposed, so we can build our pipeline and make it stronger and have the right areas, not a whole bunch of, respectfully, my dad is a PhD in chemistry, I want a whole bunch of PhDs in CS to fill the needs that Ruth is talking about for the jobs, the other 60%. Forget Microsoft, the other 60% of all jobs that will need some type of that foundational work. So hopefully
I think what you heard at that hearing doesn't reflect what's happening in the market. If people are importing people from the outside, it's because literally the mismatch of 500,000 jobs and 40,000 graduates. The other, since I memorize all of these numbers, the other data point that is interesting
full time.
Is basically all I do is memorize these numbers. If you look at all of high-skilled immigration, and immigration is a divisive topic, like a lot of people disagree and want walls and whatnot, but if you look at just the high-skilled immigration bucket, 60% of all the high-skilled immigrants that are brought into this country are in this one field. So all other fields add up to 40% of the high-skilled immigrants. The largest sector of all high-skilled immigration, 60% of all of them, are computer scientists. So no matter what your views on immigration are, you should question, why are we importing this talent and not teaching it in our own schools to our own kids, even as an option? And it leads back to this whole question of building national momentum and will around funding it.
That is such a great point. Thank you. We have time for one more question. Right here in the second row.
Assistance.
Thank you so much for your inspiring words. My name is Alicia Lane. I am a STEM program specialist for DC Public Schools. I also am the co-anchor for the DC STEM Network's computer science working group, and we're working on developing recommendations to the city of DC and its local education authorities on how to adopt or transform the current new CS framework into standards that they can adopt for themselves, or we'll make recommendations on which standards to adopt. Do you have any advice for myself or the working group and everyone here on how to develop those, develop out those recommendations and those standards? Thank you.
I'm happy to give you information and we can talk offline. But I think in short and in part, it helps to understand who the students are, what they're, because it's one thing to provide computer science, it's another thing to provide it in a school that's never seen it before, right? And so certainly understanding the students, understanding where they are big parts to curriculum development. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the cultural responsiveness piece is a big part of that, understanding how to really engage students and to provide the information in a way that's engaging. I'll stop there because there's a whole bunch more we can talk about, particularly on the non-behavioral side, but I'll let other panelists speak up if they have ideas as well.
Be glad to help offline.
I can help out afterwards as well.
I was actually just talking to someone from DC Public Schools, not in your department, but we should talk.
Whether your problem is broadly a problem in many states, most states don't have defined standards for computer science. That's why there's actually an initiative going right now. There's both a coalition of organizations coming up with a high-level framework, and the CS Teachers Association is creating a new draft of standards for states to consider adopting. So it's not like you're the only area that doesn't. Yeah.
I do have one thing to add is talk to and listen to the teachers who are willing and eager, because I've heard so many terrible stories of teachers who are willing and eager who's like, my district now says I'm not qualified to teach the class I've been teaching for the last 6 years. So as you're developing requirements for teachers and courses and certifications, talk to your League of the Willing and make sure that you have an open enough framework that whether it's the library, tech specialist, or a English teacher who wants to do it, that you make those pathways for the teachers as smooth as possible. Because we don't have enough willing as it is. We can't be like shutting out willing teachers.
Terrific. Well, before we close out, I wonder if anyone has any last words or guidance for the people in the audience who are largely policymakers, advisor to policymakers, advocates.
Computer science is cool.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I have a PhD in computer science, and I don't think we're talking about getting a PhD or getting every student to get a PhD, because frankly, the PhD isn't for everybody, period, right? But if we can provide access, I think that's really what we're talking about, and exposure. And in a number of ways, I think all of us have spoken to that, and I think we're willing to help continue the conversation. And I think that's the biggest part, right? The conversation doesn't stop here, that we can keep it moving and determine how to really get more engagement and representation in this really amazing foundational field.
I will just put a pitch out there that the White House is accepting new commitments for computer science for all. So if your organization, your district, your community is thinking of doing something that could potentially be part of a White House announcement, the commitment form is open on the Computer Science for All page on the White House website.
Well, since she said that, and anybody who wants to join the Computer Science Education Coalition, please see me. We need more.
Great. Well, thank you so much, you all. It was really a wonderful conversation, and we appreciate your time.